Service of the Korean Broadcasting System, coming to you from Seoul, the capital of the Republic of Korea. We now begin today's English broadcast on KBS World Radio. From Seoul, Korea, KBS World Radio News starts right now. On today's broadcast, North Korea launches projectiles, possibly ballistic missiles, from Gangwon Province early Saturday into the East Sea. Chief diplomats of South Korea and Russia agreed to boost cooperation on getting North Korea to end its nuclear weapons program. And the 5th Busan International Comedy Festival opens for 10 days in South Korea's port city with an opening ceremony on Friday night. Those are the headlines of Saturday News from the studio of KBS World Radio. I'm Bruce Harrison. The Joint Chiefs of Staff announced that North Korea launched unidentified projectiles from Gangwon Province around 6:49 Saturday into the East Sea. The JCS said the projectiles traveled around 250 kilometers, adding the launch was immediately reported to South Korean President Moon Jae-in. The U.S. Pacific Command initially assessed these were ballistic missiles. The launch comes a month after the North test-fired its Hwasong-14 Intercontinental Ballistic Missile, or ICBM, on July 28th. Military authorities believe the latest provocation is aimed at protesting the annual Ulchi Freedom Guardian joint military exercises that South Korea and the U.S. launched Monday. The North had test-fired a submarine-launched ballistic missile into the East Sea on August 24th last year when the joint military drill was being carried out. It then went on to launch 3 Scud-ER missiles on September 2nd, the same year when the joint drill ended. Observers believe the North opted for a low-intensity provocation by launching short-range missiles instead of submarine-launched ballistic missiles or intermediate-range ballistic missiles, which are considered strategic provocations aimed at the United States. The U.S. Pacific Command says that the missile launches were unsuccessful. U.S. Pacific Command spokesman Commander David Benham said the first and third missiles failed in flight, and the second missile launch appears to have blown up almost immediately on the launch pad Saturday morning. The spokesman said the North American Aerospace Defense Command determined the launches did not pose a threat to North America, and the Pacific Command determined they did not pose a threat to Guam. Benham said the command is working with its interagency partners on a more detailed assessment and will provide a public update if warranted. The presidential office convened Saturday a meeting of the National Security Council Standing Committee to discuss the missile launches, or alleged missile launches. In line with orders from President Moon Jae-in, the committee held a meeting chaired by the council's head, Chung Wi-yong, for an hour early Saturday. Presidential Press Secretary Yoon Young-chan said the government believes the projectiles the North launched are an improved model of a 300-millimeter multiple rocket launcher. He was quick to add that the military authorities are still thoroughly analyzing the characteristics and capacity of those projectiles. The top office's statement indicates Seoul does not believe those projectiles are ballistic missiles despite the U.S. Pacific Command's initial assessment. Yoon said the Standing Committee reviewed the North's latest provocation and the South Korean military's preparedness. He added that Seoul decided to more thoroughly conduct the Ulchi Freedom Guardian military exercise, which is currently underway. The exercise is held jointly every year between South Korea and the U.S. around this time. Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwan and her Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov have agreed to boost cooperation on getting North Korea to end its nuclear weapons program. Kang, who is currently visiting for the first time since becoming Seoul's top diplomat, and the Russian foreign minister reached the agreement during talks in Moscow on Friday. During the 2-hour meeting, Lavrov said he is content with the level their countries' ties have reached. He added that to improve ties even more, Moscow will reaffirm its willingness to advance relations in various areas. Lavrov said the South Korea-Russia summit on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Germany last month held much significance. He noted the two leaders will meet again during the Eastern Economic Forum that opens in Vladivostok on September 6th. Kang said she's confident that the upcoming summit will yield significant results not only in global issues related to the Korean Peninsula, but also in South Korea-Russia cooperation. President Moon Jae-in is scheduled to make a 2-day trip to Vladivostok from September 6th. He's set to attend the third Eastern Economic Forum and hold a summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The International Atomic Energy Agency says North Korea is accelerating efforts to build a new nuclear reactor while continuing to operate its main reactor in Yongbyon. German news agency DPA said the IAEA assessed in a report Friday that there were indications of increased activity at the light water reactor construction yard. The report said the activities are consistent with the fabrication of certain reactor components. The assessment was based on analysis of satellite imagery of the Yongbyon nuclear site. DPA noted that once the construction of the reactor is completed, the North could obtain as a byproduct plutonium, which is used to make nuclear missile warheads. The IAEA was quick to add, however, that it has not observed indications of the delivery or introduction of major reactor components into the reactor containment building. North Korea's state-run Korean Central News Agency said Saturday that leader Kim Jong-un led a simulation drill on taking over South Korea's northernmost islands of Pyongyang and Yeonpyeong. The report said the drill marked the 57th anniversary on Friday of former North Korean leader Kim Jong-il's start of Songun, or Military First Revolutionary Leadership. It said the goal of the drill was to display the North Korean Special Operations Force's capacity to smoothly carry out any kind of mission in the event of a contingency. The report claimed the drill confirmed the North's ability to instantly sweep into blazing fire enemy targets, including the headquarters of South Korea's 6th Marine Brigade on the islands of Pyongyang and Yeonpyeong. The U.S. State Department says South Korea's first Vice Foreign Minister Im Sung-nam will meet with U.S. Deputy Secretary of State John Sullivan in Washington on Monday. The two officials are set to discuss North Korea's nuclear issue and ways to strengthen the South Korea-U.S. alliance. The department said in a press release Friday that Im and Sullivan will discuss their country's continued coordination on North Korea policy, bilateral issues, and U.S.-South Korea-Japan trilateral cooperation on shared regional and global priorities. The statement also said the U.S. Deputy Secretary will reaffirm the United States' ironclad commitment to defend South Korea and its allies against threats from Pyongyang. Im and Sullivan had earlier shared views on the alliance and ways to cooperate on North Korea policies during their first telephone talk last Tuesday. The 5th Busan International Comedy Festival opened for a 10-day run in South Korea's port city with an opening ceremony Friday night. The event is the first and largest comedy festival in Asia and features a wide variety of performances, a circus act, and concerts by 51 teams of performers from 11 countries. The performances will be staged in a number of venues in Busan, including the Busan Cinema Center, Haeundae Grand Hotel, and the Design Center Busan. On Saturday and Sunday, 15 teams will perform outside in Gwangali for 2 hours from 9 p.m. And that's the news from KBS World Radio's News Center in Seoul. I'm Bruce Harrison.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Saturday Mailbag Show, KBS Listeners Lounge, coming to you from Seoul, the capital of South Korea.
It's Saturday, August 26th of 2017, and as always, we've got the latest listeners' letters, messages, and reports we receive from you coming right up.
So please stay tuned. I'm Lawrence Taylor.
And I'm Kim Ji-in. We'll be right back. How are you enjoying these cooler mornings and evenings, Lawrence?
Yeah, it's much better. The rain's finally stopped, so that's a good thing.
Right. But, I mean, during the day, it's still pretty hot. I believe it went up to, 31 degrees Celsius yesterday during the day. But like I mentioned, it's a little breezier in the mornings and a lot. Actually, yesterday morning was the first morning in several months that I woke up and did not turn on the fan right away. So,
right, that's a good sign.
Yeah, we
right.
are moving along in the seasons. But that being said, it kind of feels like August just disappeared. It flew by way too fast. And all I remember is, like we mentioned, rain and extreme humidity.
Yeah, right. It really has been an unusually wet August here in Korea, although I think all that rain certainly helped to bring the temperature down just a little bit.
Maybe, but it's actually about time the heat let up too. This past Wednesday was Choseol, which is one of the 24 traditional Korean seasonal divisions that is set to come on a piggyback ride on crickets on land and also riding fleecy clouds in the sky. Quite cute, but less poetically, it's when crickets cry and fleecy cumulus clouds can be seen in the sky, so it's autumn.
Right, and I like this one too. They also say that Choseol is when mosquitoes' mouths get twisted. I guess it means when we start to see less of them.
Right, I believe that is the gist of it, but I think nowadays I always seem to see mosquitoes well into November. I'm guessing indoor heating is to blame for that one.
Right, but aside from that, it always amazes me how these traditional seasonal divisions seem so accurate even after all these years. The sounds of crickets have definitely replaced those of cicadas sometime this week. I know in the Yeouido Park, which is obviously right outside our office, it's almost deafening, the cicadas in the summer.
Oh, yeah.
It feels like they're inside your head. Yeah.
Well put.
Right. And again, we've also seen some massive fleecy clouds in the sky this week too.
That's right. Although the recent heavy rain seems to have been quite unusual for this time of the year, I think the 24 divisions are in fact quite on point most of the times. But speaking of heavy rain, we received some unfortunate news from one of our dear monitors in India recently.
That's right. Our beloved monitor Ratan Kumar Paul wrote, "Dear Lawrence and Gian, how are you? I hope you're all very well. We are not doing well, however. We are all now affected by a flood. More than 90% of our district is underwater. All the rivers are overflowing, and the condition of our area is not good. People are suffering in a very difficult situation. There is no relief, medicine, or drinking water. But we are still listening to your programs. It is very sad for us that our favorite program, Listeners Lounge, is coming to an end. Why are you going to stop this vital program? Please change your views about Listeners Lounge." He also sent us a number of photos of his area, showing houses submerged underwater, where you can actually only see the top of the roofs of the buildings, and also people and animals in the flooded streets.
We are extremely sorry and sad to learn of this devastating disaster in the district of Dakshin Dinajpur in West Bengal. We received the message and the photos on Monday, so hopefully the conditions have gotten much better by now. But nevertheless, we hope you and everyone affected are now all safe, healthy, and that everything will be back to normal very, very soon.
Yes, everyone here, hopefully the situation gets better there soon. Also, thank you, of course, very much for continuing to listen to us despite the tough times, and also even sent us the reception report too. So thank you for that. We truly wish we could bring you some news that would uplift your spirit, but unfortunately today's episode is the second to last episode of KBS Listeners Lounge.
But of course, we are currently working very hard on coming up with bigger and better programs, so we sincerely hope that you'll give our new programs a chance too and continue to tune in to KBS World Radio.
Right, we will continue to broadcast on shortwave, accept reception reports, and also issue QSL cards. But please note that although this is mid-season, there will be slight changes to the frequency and the schedule, because starting September 4th, KBS World Radio English service will begin to broadcast for 5 hours a day, which is obviously more than double the current 2.
I believe the tech team is still ironing out some issues. Hopefully, we'll be able to give you some more details on this next week. And speaking of new frequencies, let us send out a big thank you to our monitors who were so generous and kind as we asked them to monitor our last-minute test transmissions on such short notice just past week. Thank you so much for your help.
And lastly, before we move on, we want to remind you one more time that next week we'll have the very last KBS Listeners Lounge, and we would greatly appreciate it if you could share your most memorable moments, the stories, also any hosts you remember too about this program, and also, of course, its predecessors too.
We've received a few such messages so far, and we will share some of them with you today, along with this week's letters and reports right after a quick break. So stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to KBS Listeners Lounge on KBS World Radio. It's time now for us to take a look at the listener letters and reception reports. As usual, we've received some fantastic handwritten, typed up and emailed comments, letters and reception reports from you, our listeners, and we'll share some of those with you on this program.
We'll start with the typed-up reception report we received in the mail. It's from listener Hiroyuki Akiba of Japan, and according to his report, he listened to us on Saturday, August 12th on 9.515 megahertz from 1630 to 1700 hours UTC. He used a Sony ICF SW7600GR receiver with a 10-meter wire antenna and rated the SINPO 35242. Despite the poor affair condition, he was able to give us many details about the programs he heard, which of course was Listener's Lounge that Saturday. So he mentioned that we talked about the 72nd Independence Day and the 64th anniversary of the KBS English language broadcast. I also mentioned that we played the song Chok, which he had written on the paper in perfect Hangul, and also that we read of session reports from Taiwan, Guam, India, Bangladesh, and India. He also commented, "It is very sad to know that KBS will close Listener's Lounge soon. I have listened to the program since it was called Worldwide Friendship, and some of my letters were mentioned. I hope you will resume the program very soon." Thank you very much for your report and also your message about your memories with this program, Hiroyuki.
Our next letter is from listener Roy Anderson of Wales in the UK. Roy also tuned in to us on 9.515 megahertz on August 11th at 1620 hours UTC, and he wrote, "My receiver is a communication set made by Kenwood, and the model number is TS590S. The aerial used is an outdoor inverted L. Reception of your station was very well received and also interesting." He rated the SINPO at 55434, which is very good, and he also noted that there was a discussion about mosquitoes on Seoul calling. I think I did that show, actually, as I remember. It was about the falling number of mosquitoes, so some positive news.
But falling numbers, but it's still on our minds.
Right. He also wrote at the bottom, "I am unable to enclose international reply coupons as they are no longer available in the UK. Sorry." Well, there's no need to be sorry at all. Let me take this opportunity to remind all of our listeners that there is no need to send us any international reply coupons, as KBS takes care of any postage fee that incurs for issuing the QSL cards. It is kind of interesting that they aren't actually available in the UK now, though. I suppose not many people use them anymore. But anyway, thank you very much for your report, Roy.
We also heard from our dear monitor, Mr. Alan Holder of Isle of Wight in the UK. He dropped by our online reception report board with his logs dated July 30th through August 12th, during which period he listened to us on 9.515 megahertz, 11.810 megahertz, and 15.575 megahertz using his Sanjin ATS 803A portable receiver with an outdoor Wellbrook ALA 1530 loop antenna. It looks like the recession conditions are finally picking up on that end, judging by the SINPO readings at least. They were generally fair with this, when the signal was there at least. And here's how Alan summed up the period. 15.575 megahertz recession peaking this month, generally fair strength, sometimes weak. As for 11.810 megahertz, occasionally comes through fair to poor with China co-channel, of course. Most days, KBS was inaudible. 9.515 megahertz signal strength slightly stronger lately.
And Alan also sent us a very touching message. He wrote, "Dear Gian, Lawrence and Yuna, I'm very sorry to learn on this week's Listeners Lounge that this item will be cancelled as of September 2nd, when your program reshuffle takes effect. At first, I had to check the calendar to make sure it wasn't April 1st, after which I tuned into another airing of the program just to make sure I hadn't misheard the announcement. Of course, I really a huge expansion of the KBS daily programming, extra work for the program producers and announcers, and I suspect that most of these extra hours will not appear on shortwave, but only on your web streaming.
On the contrary, Alan, we will be broadcasting all 5 hours worth of contents on shortwave. We are, as I mentioned before, currently working on the time reshuffle and the new frequencies as well. So we hope that our shortwave listeners will continue to tune in and send us feedback, to which we'll continue to reply via post and email, and perhaps even mention on air sometimes. Well, continuing with Alan's message, but as you can imagine, I am really disappointed that the decision was made to discontinue a program solely dedicated to listener feedback. Such a program has been a cornerstone of the KBS overseas radio service for decades, and there are very few international broadcasters that do not broadcast such programs. Listening to your weekly show makes me feel part of a worldwide family, and I always like to find out more about who your listeners are, their lives, experiences, and opinions of KBS World Radio. The fact that the show will soon cease to exist is hard to take in.
That's the part of the program Gian and I will miss the most too, I think. Even in just the past several months, I also felt like I was part of a worldwide family, and the show has such a long history, no less. So it's also very sad for us too, as listeners. Of course. And Alan wrote, I have fond memories of the listener contact shows from the late 1970s when I started listening to KBS. It was called Listener's Corner. Around 1983 or 1984, there were two shows, Bridge of Friendship, which read out letters received and answered questions, as well as some music and chit-chat about various topics by the presenters. And there was shortwave feedback with a more technical slant. At around this time, a regular contributor to this show was William Matthews of the USA, who presented alternating DX reports and also tech tips. In the 1990s, Bridge of Friendship became From Us to You, and by 1997, shortwave feedback had become multi-wave feedback, taking into account the more varied forms of your program delivery, such as satellite and the internet. And by the 2000s, there was this one weekly program, which became Listener's Lounge, and formerly including DX information from Krista Brunstrom in Sweden, Kevin O'Donovan in the USA, and also a gentleman in India whose name he had forgotten.
That would be Prithviraj Purkayastha of India. How could we forget? Thank you very much for your contributions one more time. And I believe he meant to say Worldwide Friendship for the 90s version. I think Bridge of Friendship was back in the 80s. But thank you very much for the rundown of the history of the listener feedback programs on KBS. I'm going to continue reading Alan's letter. Finally, he said, I think management felt that less emphasis should be put on promoting shortwave radio, internet delivery being the way forward. I really hope that a dedicated listener show will appear again in the near future. I am sure that others will be saddened by the decision to axe your show. Kind regards, Alan Holder. Well, thank you so much for sharing your memories with us one more time, Alan, as well as being a constant support for us through so many years. I'll miss reading your letters on air, but I sincerely hope that you will continue to keep in touch with us.
Now, Alan briefly mentioned the listener Krista Brunstrom of Sweden, and incidentally, Krista also sent us a report on 9.515 megahertz recently as well. He tuned into us via the frequency on August 19th from 1615 to 1700 hours UTC, and he rated the SINPO at 35333. He gave us a quick description of the programs heard, and he wrote, I was certainly sorry to hear that the Listener's Lounge show will be discontinued. China Radio International used to have a similar show called Listener's Garden. It was a brilliant mix of listener letters and information about China and station news. When it was discontinued a number of years ago, the station's programming became far less interesting. It seemed shortwave listeners didn't count anymore. I have been a listener to KBS with its various names since the early 1960s, and I have learnt a lot about Korea over the years. I realize that many things need to change, but it seems many station managements feel that shortwave is outdated. I should think that you should find your most interested listeners among your shortwave audience.
I'm so grateful that both Krista and Alan said station management and not radio producers, because there really is a huge difference. Thank you so much for everything, Krista, and please do keep in touch. All right, before we run out of time, let's take a look at a few more reception reports. As we mentioned earlier, despite the devastating flood in his area, our monitor Ratan Kumar Paul of India has emailed us a reception report. From August 8th through the 14th, Ratan monitored our broadcasts on 9.880 megahertz from 1400 to 1500 hours UTC using a Sony ICF digital receiver with a telescopic antenna. Listening conditions started out good on the 8th with a 4 across-the-board rating, but was only poor to fair for the rest of the week. Thank you so much, Ratan, and once again, we hope you're doing much better today.
Our Bangladeshi monitor, Hazi Abdul Manan, sent us a report dated August 14th through to the 18th. Using his national analog receiver with a telescopic antenna, Hazi listened to us on 9.880 megahertz from 1400 to 1600 hours UTC on those dates, and he rated the SINPO at 3 across the board for all 5 days. Thank you very much, Hazi.
Listener Muralidhar M of India sent us a couple of reports on 9.880 megahertz as well. He used a Texan PL660 receiver with a Sanjin ANT60 antenna and tuned into us on the frequency from 1400 to 1500 hours UTC on August 8th. And again, a week later on August 15th, the same frequency at the same time. On both days, the SINPO was rated 3 across the board. Thank you very much, Murali.
And another one of our monitors in India, PS Sakar, sent us several reports via email as well. On August 17th, PS listened to us on 15.575 megahertz from 1300 to 1400 hours UTC, and he rated the SINPO at 4 across the board. From 1500 to 1600 hours UTC, he tuned into us on 9.880 megahertz and gave an all 3 SINPO rating. And last but not least, he listened to us on both 9.515 megahertz and 9.640 megahertz from 1600 to 1700 hours UTC, and the SINPO stood at 4 across the board. He used a Texan 606 receiver with a telescopic antenna. Thank you very much for your report, PS.
And that's all the time we have for the letters, emails, and reception reports from you today. We'll be sure to send out the corresponding QSL cards to everyone who requested. And again, we cannot stress this point enough. We will continue to broadcast on shortwave and continue to receive or accept reception reports from all of you listeners overseas and send out corresponding QSL cards as requested. So please continue to tune in to KBS World Radio, even though Listeners Lounge will be coming to an end as of next week.
That's all we have for you this week on KBS Listeners Lounge. We hope you enjoyed the show. This has been Lawrence Taylor.
And this has been Kim Ji-eun. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you for tuning in to KBS World Radio. KBS World Radio is Korea's flagship international broadcaster, airing in 11 different languages. The English service of KBS World Radio broadcasts 2 hours a day for various media outlets, including shortwave radio, satellite radio, and internet. Visit our website at world.kbs.co.kr, where you can stream all of our content on our internet radio Wink by tuning into various channels like Wink 24 and Wink Music. Wink is also available on mobile if you download our on-air app onto your mobile phone. Visit our Facebook page at www.facebook.com/EnglishKBS or follow us on Twitter at KBS World Radio. You can also email us at english@kbs.co.kr.